During the 1980s, countless horny teenagers were getting slashed left and right, but there are also numerous films focused on kids facing their own monsters. In this month's episode, we will explore 3 horror films from that decade that feature child protagonists. We will dive into the darkest depths of childhood in The Pit from 1981. Then a child will have to face off against an electrical entity in the film Pulse from 1988. Then we journey back to a small town in the 1960s where a young boy must unravel the mystery of the Lady in White from 1988. Join us as we witness unspeakable horror in a child's eyes on this month's episode of My Dad's Video Store. Well, Gray is unable to join us this month, but joining me to help unpack these creepy kids' films is my fellow co-host Waylon Bacon. How goes it, Mr. Bacon?
It goes. I'm here. I'm trying to read as much news as I can take on a daily basis, and eating a lot of chocolate.
Chocolate, and whatever else. Probably stiffer substances as well.
Yes, non-alcoholic beer because I'm a workaholic, so I can't drink and be comfortable by myself at least. But I'm giving myself the impression of drinking.
Nice. Well, speaking of drinking, also joining us is the host and creator of the horror podcast Old Man Brad Hargis. My fellow Brad, how are you?
I am doing well. I'm doing well. I don't consume as much news. I try to stay away from it because it depresses me.
Yeah.
Smart.
Yeah. I'm kind of on the balance beam of I don't want to stick my head in the sand. I still want to know what's happening. But at the same time, I can't do it all the time because it's overwhelming. And I think that's their plan, actually, is to overwhelm us. So
I get bits here and there and go, okay, I'm good.
Yep. Yeah. It's just well, what fresh hell do we have today? I'll look at it when I'm having my coffee, and then I'll just kind of go on with my life. So, Gray and I met you at Horror Hound, Brad. But for our listeners out there, can you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. As you know, the name, I'm Old Man Brad, slightly less Old Man Brad, I guess.
As we discovered, yes, at Horror Hound.
I do a podcast dedicated to horror where I review movies, I talk to filmmakers, and just honestly have a fun time doing it. And Tubi is also my source. I do a lot of Tubi content as well. So digging the depths of Tubi to find those diamonds in the rough, which, there's
a lot. There's so much. There's a lot on Tubi.
Oh, there's a lot on there. Yeah.
Yeah. What recent gems that you've uncovered?
Over this past summer, I really started to get into Spanish horror, which moved over to more Italian horror, especially 60s, 70s, 80s era.
Yeah.
So I've really been into watching a lot of that. And last night I watched Black Sunday for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Starring Barbara Steele.
Yeah, Mario Bava.
Absolutely loved
Amazing.
The movie.
Yeah.
It looks beautiful. That black and white is fantastic. And I'm just eating that stuff up right now, getting into that old horror, and I'm loving it.
Nice. Well, hard to go wrong with some classic Mario Bava. He's got a lot of them. I still really... Blood and Black Lace is one I frequently revisit.
That's on my list. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, watch that and then think about Dario Argento's career, especially Suspiria and stuff. You'll be like, I see. Okay, very good.
It's always been a blind spot for me, Italian, Spanish, a lot of that era.
Yeah.
So I'm going back to the Giallo and everything else because I'd never really watched a lot of it. And last summer, I watched the Blind Dead series.
Oh, yeah.
And I was hooked. I absolutely loved the series, and I was like, I need more. Give me more.
I don't think I've ever seen the whole series. I've seen Tombs of the Blind Dead. I think that's the one I saw. And
that's the first one.
Yeah. And I don't think I've seen any of the others, but it was super creepy, and it has some of the creepiest zombies I've ever seen committed to film. So good. You're a perfect guest for this episode because on this month's episode, we're discussing horror films told through the eyes of adolescents. There were quite a few of these in the 80s. It's often a decade that's often defined by a glut of slasher films, but honestly, there were films like The Curse with Will Wheaton, There was Roland Emmerich's early film Joey, or as I saw it, Making Contact. There was The Gate with a very young Stephen Dorff. There was Watchers with Corey Haim, etc. There was just tons of these. And I really related to these films as, the protagonists were all my age at the time. So without further ado, let's dive into our first film, The Pit from 1981.
Not nice people.
Oh no, nasty people. And we know some awfully nasty people, don't we?
We all have to go sometime.
He's going through that difficult stage. Girls.
Now don't let that little perv get to you.
Miss Livingston.
Yes, you know.
Oh, Miss Livingston.
Pretty awful mess. What's left of her.
I know where there's a huge hole in the ground. And at the bottom of the hole, down in the dark, there's some things.
No one else in the whole world knows about them but you.
She's pretty. Really pretty.
Well then, she's just what we've been waiting for, isn't she?
All right. Brad, can you synopsize The Pit for our audience out there? And best of luck with this crazy movie.
Well, I didn't come up with my own. I just went over and copied it, and I'm just going to read that synopsis because I'm like, this movie's strange. I'm not even going to try.
It's fair enough.
Jamie is a solitary, misunderstood preteen boy. Boy, is he. His classmates pick on him, his neighbors think he's weird, and his parents ignore him. But now, Jamie has a secret weapon. Deep in the woods, he has discovered a deep pit full of man-eating creatures he calls trogs. And it isn't long before he gets the idea for getting revenge and feeding the trogs in the process.
Pretty succinct. Yeah, that's one way. There's so much more to
That's the
this
easiest
movie.
way. Oh, yeah.
There's so much more to unpack in this crazy movie. Waylon, had you ever seen The Pit before? Was this a first-time watch for you? And what did you think of this bizarro, crazy fucking movie?
It was my first time seeing The Pit. I liked it in spite of itself. Like, it's
That's a way to put it. Yeah.
yeah. Because it is a batshit crazy movie. It starts off like 3 different plot lines, which you don't know how they're going to weave them together. Because you've got the kid who is going to grow up to be some kind of a sexual deviant. Got the element where he's got a teddy bear that talks to him named Teddy. And then you've got the pit with the monsters. And somehow I was still involved. I was, I didn't have any moments of, that's a weird pivot. Like, it all made complete sense within the framework that they'd established. And it's such a tonally odd film, too, which might actually kind of work for it. It's played out like Amy said, it almost feels like a TV movie. But there's things in there that would never happen in a TV movie. Like, there is the scene where Jamie, he's into the librarian at his school, and he convinces the librarian that someone has kidnapped her niece. And he's got like a pre-recorded tape message he plays over her phone while he's hiding outside in the bushes, just so he can blackmail her into taking her top off and he can snap some Polaroids. Whoa! What the fuck? And while all this kind of shit's happening, you've got this like cutesy Hallmark movie of the week circa 1980s soundtrack playing in the background too. So the whole thing is incredibly weird. Somehow it kind of works.
You're right about that. It's tonally so bizarre. And we'll get into that, why that is, because it was written one way and it was directed another. Brad, had you seen this? You are, the purveyor of gems on Tubi. Had you seen this before? And what did you think of this?
I had not seen it before. It was on my list. I have quite a list on Tubi. As I'm scrolling through Tubi, I just start adding things, and this was on the list. I just hadn't gotten to it yet. And it is an odd film. There was, like you said, the made-for-TV soundtrack going on, and then there's like, is this supposed to be a weird comedy? Am I supposed to take this more serious? Is it supposed to be darker? Monster movie? What is this? And it's everything like mixed into a pot and just like, here you go. This is what you get. It's very odd. At first, I wasn't sure how I was going to enjoy it. By the end, I was like, I think I kind of liked it. I don't know. I'm still questioning. Like, did I?
It's a lot to process. So this movie has really become kind of a little bit of a cult film, and rightfully so. I mean, I can't imagine any other destiny for this film outside of cult status, because it's so odd. And like you guys mentioned, the TV quality of it, it's like an after-school special. That's what it kind of reminds me of. The quality of it and the feel of it reminds you of an after-school special, except an after-school special with the creepiest kid you've ever met in your life. Holy shit. We all went through that awkward stage of like, the tween kind of years. And man, does this like puts like a weird like magnifying glass on it. But at the same time, you're like, wait a minute, this kid's a freaking psycho. It's interesting too, because I had to read up about this because I was like, wait a minute, is this happening in his head? Or wait a minute, this is actually happening? The teddy bear turns its head at one point? I guess the screenwriter and the director went in two different kind of routes. And I think that's why this film has such a strange kind of feel and sensibility to it, because the writer and the original story was called Teddy, and I guess you can find the novelization if you're ever curious. It's just called Teddy, and that's based on the original screenplay. It was much darker. The kid was much younger, 7 or 8. So all the kind of perverted stuff that the kid does, like dropping the glass, it was much more innocent in the actual script. But because of the age of the kid that they cast, it has a whole other connotation to it. And in the original screenplay, it was all in his head. When he takes the babysitter to the pit towards the end of the film, it's full of just the bodies. There's no trogs whatsoever. He's just been killing these like people that have been mean to him in the neighborhood, like left and right. The director took it in a different way. He made it a monster movie and like made it campy as well. It has this like underlying uber creepy film like as a foundation, but then he like adds this like kind of level of camp to it. Wacky montage of him trying to get animals and stuff to go feed the pit.
My favorite scene in the whole movie actually is the kid, and he's trying to pull this cow into the pit, and he's talking to the cow about, if you stay here, they're gonna trick you and kill you and eat you, and I have to do the same thing, but it's for a good cause. It's for my friends, the Trolologs. Yeah. One of the have we talked about this yet? That they're troglodytes, but he calls them the Trolologs. Yeah. The screenwriter hated too. He was like, Trolologs. Fuck,
and
dude,
I couldn't help but every time I heard him say Trololog, I kept thinking of that like meme from like 10 years ago with the Russian guy going
They probably could have worked putting that in the movie.
Yeah, right. If they ever like redo the pit, someone should just put that over the soundtrack.
Just like the scene where he's pushing the wheelchair with the lady. All I was playing in my head was the Benny Hill theme.
Yeah. I mean, it's wacky. I mean, you can't help but kind of laugh at it too. He's like, first he's all nice to her, and then he just starts shoving her at like top speed to the pit. Yeah, the way these folks fall into this pit, it's kind of hysterical. I mean, the little girl just walks in. I mean, it's a giant hole. It's not like he covered it up with a tarp or anything. Yeah. It's broad daylight for most of them, except for the Halloween one. Speaking of the Halloween one, it's so weird you see that scene twice in the movie. Like, I think like in post, they just added that to the beginning to like kind of hook you in, because you don't see the pit for quite some time. And I guess they wanted to get to the monsters of the movie as quick as possible. But it's a strange way to begin the movie, honestly, to have that little Halloween scene. And then you see basically almost shot for shot that whole scene again later on in the film.
Yeah. it was an odd choice because at first you were like, okay, so this is after everything starts, and then when you see it again, you're like, oh, why do we need to see it again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. It's like they didn't even like re-edit it except for they took out the flashback to the bully punching him in the face and the little girl laughing. They threw that in at the beginning, but other than that, it is like shot for shot the same sequence.
And it's weird because I can see like why they did it. There's so many things that happen in that film. I feel like it did need this opening scene to kind of like give it a focus and kind of give it that rope thing where you know, we're at the beginning of Rope, we already know the body's in the cupboard. They needed something like that, but I wonder if they just didn't have the money to shoot a new scene because they could have shot just some random person falling into the pit and the sounds of monsters, and then we'd know, there's a pit with monsters, and then the rest of the film would make more sense. But I feel like likely it was a weird editing financial thing of, well, maybe we'll open with this flashback.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they just decided to do that in post. It doesn't seem like it was something planned for at all to just reuse a whole sequence like that. But it's interesting too because you find out about the pit. He actually tells his babysitter about the pit before you actually see it, which I also thought was a very strange choice. I mean, we don't actually ever see when he discovers the pit at any point. He's already discovered it by the time we've started this movie, it appears. Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was an unusual choice as well. What did you guys think about the whole teddy bear element in this movie?
Oh.
Him talking like Son of Sam style to his teddy bear.
I loved that.
I did, but I wanted it explored more. Like, was the teddy bear alive? Was it not? Because the scene where it turns its head, and it's like, okay, what is this in his head? Is this not in his head? Like the whole time through this, you don't know what's in his head, what's not in his head. Which maybe that was their creative choice, since the script originally was all in his head, and the director's like, well, maybe not.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's the one scene where the teddy bear turns his head that actually just kind of makes you wonder that, because he's not in the room when that happens. And it's just the babysitter has come into the room and found the porn mag, which I have something to say about that scene. She looks at the porn mag under his bed, and for his age, she's just like, I can't believe he has this. And I'm like, that's the most normal thing about this kid. Everything else is like so fucked up about him. Him looking at a porn mag as a tween.
She was shocked.
Normal.
She was surprised to find it. Like, I can't believe he has it.
I can't believe he's got this with the teddy bear and this.
Like he's a preteen. He's curious.
Yes, yeah, indeed.
And she knows he's a pervert. Amy kept yelling at her to lock the door because this poor woman.
Man, I would have been out of there. I would have been calling those parents like, you need to come back from your trip right now. Your son is a freak. So
yeah, she wakes up and he's staring at her. By the way, they have a shot. He's staring at her while she's sleeping. They open that scene with a close-up shot of, I guess she's got like a nip that's popped out.
Yeah, there's a nip pop. Yeah,
but it's such an awkward shot. For a minute, I was like, "What the hell are we looking at?" It's a clunky film.
I love his response to that. He's just like, I'm just watching you sleep. Like, what the fuck? Like, I am out of here.
It's normal. It's okay. It's what we do here in the house.
Yeah. It's interesting. They kept her there because she's into like child psychology, and like she's like studying it, and she's going to the library and like picking out books. Also, speaking of the library, what is his deal with that librarian? He is like stalking her like right from the get-go in the film, with the teacher. He's having to write this something on the chalkboard over and over again, and it's because he brought this kind of like nudie book that he had like cut out a picture from. And I love the teacher's response to that too. He's like, "Did you do this?" No, it came like that. Well, I'll have to take your word for it.
Yeah,
I was just like, case closed.
I'm gonna believe you.
Yeah. I wouldn't believe this kid for anything. He's nuts.
And he really wanted to ride that bike.
Oh, yeah.
You really did.
And honestly, though, I was just kind of cracking up at the revenge ones. I mean, the boyfriend, obviously, that her boyfriend doesn't deserve it in any way, just playing football with the kid. But man, the old lady is pretty awful to him. And so is the little girl. And
Abigail.
Yeah.
Well, the little girl really committed to the bit of her bike falling apart. Like, how long was she sitting there with her bike almost in pieces?
Yeah, just waiting for him with a trap. Yeah.
It's like a Calvin and Hobbes skit.
Well, I'm not gonna ride my bike today. I'm gonna wait for this kid to show up.
Wait,
So
he'll come by. I know he will.
he can't resist. If you ever try to think about the plot holes in this thing, they're just loaded. It's like Swiss cheese. You can't take your eyes off this movie. It's so bizarre. You're like laughing at one moment and then you're just like creeped out the next. And the whole thing is just so what the fuck. Yeah, this movie made quite the impression on me as a kid when I saw it. You know, like my mouth is just open the whole time. Like, what the fuck is this? This movie is crazy.
I think if I would have saw it as a kid, I probably would have been the same way. I mean, I was like that as an adult going, what the hell am I watching?
Yeah.
And this was the first one I watched, so I was like, what did I agree to? What did I get myself into?
Welcome to my nightmare, Brad.
Hey, you had it on your list, Brad, so.
I mean, I love some trash movies on Tubi, don't get me wrong. But I was like, whoa.
This one's demented.
Yes.
Yeah, this one
is a whole different level.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. The third act is the most problematic part to me of this movie because it's almost out of left field in a way because like we're barely with Jamie, our main character, for the last kind of act of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
The Trogs get out, he lets them out. And then it turns into this like monsters roaming the countryside. You know, there's skinny dippers. There's like POV shots a la Jaws or something. Like, you know, and then there's like, you know, there's a lot of stuff with these cops who are also buffoons. And they have all these like bad comedy moments with these police officers. And then they hunt down the Trogs. But then I don't know if there's like a scene missing, but like when he goes to live with his grandparents at the very end, was he like kicked out of his parents' house? Was that established? And the dumbest thing, the little girl pushes him in the hole.
Yeah.
It's the dumbest ending.
Maybe parents, you know, prolong their trip. So
Yeah.
he had to go somewhere else. I don't know. That like these parents are like, we don't want anything to do with him.
Yeah.
So we're gonna stay gone as long as possible.
Right.
Yeah. And I can't believe they were like, our kid is going to grow up to be a sexual predator. Let's leave and hire some young lady. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
are you guys like Amanda Palmer and Neil Gaiman?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
I mean, I guess they were probably like, we don't want to take the little serial killer with us, so we want to actually have a good time and drink some Mai Tais.
Yeah.
Could wreak some havoc on trip. Just imagine putting him on a beach with a bunch of bikinis.
Oh.
I know, right? Any other thoughts about The Pit?
The town they shot in, it's in Wisconsin somewhere, has the coolest gazebo I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Did anyone else notice that? You're like, that gazebo rules.
That gazebo really reminded me. I was almost like, is this the same town they shot The Dead Zone in? Because there's that like classic gazebo scene, and I don't think it is though. This is a Canadian film.
I could tell because there was a lot of boots and going on there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was waiting for the Wisconsin because my dad was from Wisconsin, so I've got plenty of relatives who say bag and pop and all that stuff. So I was waiting for that, but it's close. Did you ever wonder like the Canadian, Wisconsin, Minnesota? There's like a weird overlap. And I'm not sure. Is that just because it's cold? I'm not sure what.
I think
creates
it's probably
that
the
overlap.
folks that settled around that area.
You think it's just like close enough to the border there? Yeah.
I'm not an expert on that, but yeah. There's definitely some similarities between accents. The Canadian crew probably felt right at home.
Probably. We love you, Canada.
Oh yeah, we do. I'm Team Canada all the way. So
yes.
Especially these days.
I did want to say you were talking about the cops being buffoons. That towards the end when they're just like basically just shoot, don't ask questions kind of thing, and they get to the pit and they just start firing on all these trolologs.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, we didn't waste any time with this, did we? They were serious.
I like that they're all like men in their like 70s too, or in like late 60s. They're all really old. old. Let's get as many old men with guns as we can to go hunt down these trogs.
Let's go on the hunt, a trog hunt.
Trog hunt, yeah. So much to say about this movie. It's such a bizarre film. It is weird though. I kind of would recommend it to, I mean, at least to weirdo like cinephiles, because I'm like, if you haven't seen this, you gotta see this. It's completely fucked up.
It is one of those that you definitely need to experience. If you're into just film, horror, whatever, I mean, like, have you seen The Pit?
Yeah.
You just need to experience it.
For sure. Yeah. Maybe you never need to see it again, but man, it's something to experience once for sure. It's probably a great film. I watched it by myself, and I watched it by myself when I was a kid out of my dad's video store, but this is probably actually a fun movie to watch with friends, possibly. So this might be a good part of the right kind of friends. But
if you're on a date,
no.
There's
definitely not a date movie, but like, bad movie night with friends, the pit might be a good one for sure.
I mean, if you don't want to, see that person again.
Yes. Put it on. Yeah. Good way to get rid of friends. So
use it as a test. If you show the movie on the date and it goes well, this might be a keeper.
Or you might get killed in your sleep. So
yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, The Pit is available to stream for free on Tubi, and Kino Lorber has a Blu-ray available as well. All right, well, from evil teddy bears and a pit of hungry troglodytes to an electric entity that is wreaking havoc on a young boy's family, it's time for Pulse from 1988.
David, it's a good thing your school didn't let out last week. We had a lot of excitement around here.
What happened? A fire?
No. Hank Jordan, the guy who lived there, just went crazy or something.
Spooky, ain't it? Did it talk to you? The voice in the wires.
Listen, please.
He seems to think that what happened at the Jordan house is going to happen here.
It comes into the wires. I saw it. And that night you were gone, I felt it.
Pulse, the ultimate shocker.
Waylon, can you please synopsize Pulse for our audience?
Yeah. So Pulse, written and directed by Paul Golding, is about David, whose parents are divorced, and he comes from Colorado to spend some time with his dad out in Los Angeles. His dad and stepmom live in a very cool, modern, electric house. And by I say electric, I mean it's got all the modern doodads. It's got the touch lamps. It's got these bars on the windows because it's LA that automatically open and close. The problem is that shortly before the kid arrived, their next door neighbor went insane in his house and was discovered sort of fried to death. No one knows what happened. And the kid slowly learns that there is some kind of an evil force living in the electronics, which just wants to drive people insane and eventually kill them. And then of course you get kind of the Fright Night thing where then it's this kid's job. He's trying to convince everybody that, we've got to avoid the electronic appliances. There's something that wants to kill us there. Everyone thinks the kid's nuts. Eventually it all comes to light. The thing about Pulse is that this seems like an inane movie concept, evil electronics, but it is pulled off quite well. I was surprised watching this movie how well it was pulled off. There's a lot of little cool bits and pieces and sequences I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, that is my breakdown of Pulse. Thank you. I'll see myself out.
Awesome synopsis. Yeah. I don't know why this one's not talked about and not been seen more. It's really fallen kind of under the radar. It was never really well known even in its day. Brad, was this one that you had seen before? What did you think of Pulse?
This wasn't even on my radar before you mentioned it. I didn't even know about it. If you said Pulse, I think of like
Japanese,
Kristen Bell movie or the Japanese,
the original Kurosawa one,
I had no idea this existed, and then having Joey Lawrence in it,
and his brother,
like I had no idea, but watching it, I'm like, how did I not know about this? This is a movie I think I probably would have rented from the video store multiple times as a kid.
Oh, it's top notch.
I dug this one a lot. Like there were many scenes in this that I was like, this is cool. I don't know. It hooked me in, and I was like fully engaged into this whole electronic poltergeist, knockoff, so to speak.
They got those cool sequences where you see the poltergeist sort of infecting the inner workings of like their television. And they kind of do it. It almost looks like an invasion of electric ants. You got these little blue sparks showing up on all the solders and wires and stuff like that. And I was like, what? And they have stop motion scenes where once it's possessing the TV and you see things melting down and refusing and it's all done with stop motion. It was surreal and awesome.
Yeah, it's really well done.
Yeah, I don't know why this wasn't talked about more. Why it didn't catch an audience.
Yeah, I don't know why it never caught on. So this was, as you saw at the beginning, it was from Columbia Pictures. I know that this film was greenlit under like one president of Columbia, and then there was a change of guard, and then they kind of truncated and buried the release. Like it barely got released in theaters, hardly made any money. However, I am shocked it never caught on video. Also, the box was amazing for this. If you ever see the original box art for Pulse, like with the girl and like lightning's like hitting her wrist and her eyes are like lit up, it's super cool. Like you should want to like grab this box, but I don't know, for some reason this movie just never caught on. It's bizarre because it's so well done. It's such a well done movie.
And in fact, apparently at the initial screening, once they wrapped it, the executives were really excited. The outgoing regime, they were like, "Oh man, my palms are sweaty. This is sorry, my printer just started making sounds, possibly possessed. It did just randomly start printing something, and it says." Get out.
Is this a
now.
bit, Waylon?
I wish it was.
You're getting into Pulse a little too much there, kind of turning into like a prop comedy kind of bit.
He actually bought the house from the movie.
Right. Yes.
It's me. I'm the carrot top of horror podcasters. We're saying, oh no, but yeah, so they were really excited about Pulse at the time. And they were going to give it like a big push. And I can't confirm this, but I think the same regime that came in and then dumped Pulse is also the same regime that came in and dumped Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Pretty sure. Bad decisions. Both of these are both amazing films. Yeah.
Pulse is an interesting one. It's one that I've always kind of like, I mention to people and they've just never heard of it. It doesn't even have much of a distribution. You can watch it on YouTube, for free. So just putting that out there to folks. It's not even on Tubi or anything like that, but it really should be. The cast is great. You've got Clifton Young, who's been in so many things, from like Flight of the Navigator to like a million TV shows to Paul Schrader's Blue Collar even. And, of course, the unofficial sequel to Rocky Horror, Shock Treatment. I really love Clifton Young in that. Roxanne Hart, she's probably best known because she plays the girlfriend in the original Highlander film. She's great in this. And, of course, you have a young Joey Lawrence as well, who's really our main protagonist. And, of course, his parents conned the filmmakers into using Matthew Lawrence, his little brother.
Yeah.
And everything that comes out of Matthew Lawrence, it's the one thing, like, everything is very kind of pretty serious and suspenseful and, like, gripping in this movie and well done. But all the scenes with Matthew Lawrence, I couldn't help but kind of crack up at. His line delivery is pretty campy fun. You know, I mean, he's a young kid and stuff, but man, some of it is just absolutely hilarious. I'm not even sure entirely how they did some of the, as we were talking about, the internal effects. Is that macro photography, or did they build like large versions of these things and then just film them like, you know, Hitchcock used to? Because they didn't have, you know, Hitchcock used to want like inserts of like, you know, the phone being dialed or like something in someone's hand, and they'd build like giant hands and shit to shoot it because they didn't have macro photography really back then. So I don't know how they did it, because there's not a lot of information out there about this movie.
I loved those scenes though, like when it flies into the TV, when it's going in, and you go and you get deeper and deeper, and I'm just like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah. It's
like, and the liquid metal, like where it's all like kind of liquefied and it's moving around.
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
yeah.
I was like, it's going to turn into a Terminator.
Right.
Look out.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun,
Yeah,
dun,
it's
dun.
kind of an early version of that effect. Because I know they did that with just like metal manipulating it and stuff, like in even Terminator 2. That's really cool. I mean, who knows? They may have just done that with like a soldering gun, stuff like heating it up underneath and then using a magnet or something simple like that. I'm not sure. But it's very effective. And that's one thing about this movie, is that, man, it has really held up well. A lot of these kind of practical effects and the electricity effect is all really effective and well done. It doesn't really, it stood the test of time better than a lot of, a lot of the CGI we have today.
Oh, yeah.
Really, this movie is very tight. And I wish that this
It is.
filmmaker had made more movies, because it doesn't seem like he did much before or after this. So, and it's such a solid script and such a solid horror thriller.
This is his only feature film directed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a big
Which-
movie for like a studio.
Yeah. And it's one of those that, do you think if it would have got maybe a little bit more behind it, became even more of a cult hit, he could have like moved on and done other things?
Had more of a career, yeah, and he should
Maybe.
have, because this is really fantastic. I also really love they reused the movie Starman, little bits from the movie Starman over and over again. Like I recognized it immediately when it kind of like pushes in on the like circle of hair from like kind of the opening of that film. And I was like, oh shit, that's Starman. And then that you see it kind of, they bring it back up like repeatedly throughout the film, which I thought was really cool. Just a nice little Easter egg. And there's some really great set pieces in this, particularly like the shower scene is fun. Man, and that part was like kind of nightmare fuel for me, like her getting 3rd-degree burns in the shower and stuff. Like this really, the nightmare of our appliances attacking us, from like the glass about to fall into the garbage disposal and like shoot out on his face.
Yeah.
You almost think like, oh, killer appliances? That sounds kind of dumb. But like the way they do it in this film, it completely works, and it's really effective.
I think people would expect, oh, is it going to transform into something and come after him?
Right.
Is this like
Nope.
like that? No,
Nope.
this is done in a whole different way than we've ever seen before.
Yeah, it's like a home invasion movie, and it's like sabotaging all the things, all the creature comforts we have.
Imagine if it was remade today with all the technology we have.
Oh, yeah,
but
like a
doing
smart
it
home. Yeah.
subtly like
Oh.
this.
Yeah.
It'd be great, actually. And it felt kind of timely, actually. Like the old guy, there's an old man played by Charles Tainer who knows what's going on. And at some point, he's talking to Roxanne Hart, and he's saying, you know, unplug everything. That's what I've been doing. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but do it. Unplug. And I was like, that's like everyone's right now. I'm getting off Facebook. You know? It's the same shit.
They've got deals on kerosene.
Yeah.
Which
I loved him.
I'm sad Gray is not with us, because, you know, Charles Tyner, of course, who steals the show
Tyner,
in
thank you.
The beloved Hamburger, the motion picture, which gets brought up.
Is he in that?
Yes, he's the guy.
that's-
He's the man. He's like, put those cookies down, motherfucker. So yeah, that's Charles Tyner. So yeah, who's
God, we can't get away from this movie.
we cannot escape him. Try to get out, but it keeps pulling me back in.
But he was like that typical 80s old guy that you just see kind of just show
Yeah,
up.
kind of like Friday
Yes.
the 13th. You know, you
Yeah.
got the guy. Don't
You're
go to
doomed.
Camp.
You're all
doomed to Camp
doomed.
Crystal Lake. And he looks kind of like him too. Charles Tyner does. Yeah. That sort of the soothsayer, sort of like forewarning character that's just telling you that you're all gonna die because he knows what's actually going on and you don't.
This is why you should listen to your elders.
You should.
Yeah. That's what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be the old guy who just tells everybody, "You're doomed, doomed." Although, I've been working at my job for 9 years, so I'm kind of turning into that person. Yeah, just you know what's going to happen. Don't clock in for lunch early, or they'll be mad. Take the full 30 minutes.
Man, he has got some really good lines, Charles Tyner does. I love that the paranoia is just another word for heightened awareness.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, also the scene with the car, that was really effective too. That was really well done. And honestly, the whole last act of this movie is really intense. Like everything that happens after the shower where the mom's kind of taken out and then and the dad who's he's been the slowest to come around because, he's skeptical. He's obviously thinking with a logical head. He's like, what? I mean, this thing's just kind of malfunctioning, stuff happens. Things break, but until the shower scene happens, he finally comes around. He's like, okay, something is indeed actually going on here, and I have to protect my son at all costs.
What did you think of the dramatic saving of Dad, where he's going to fall into the water?
Oh yeah, they milked that. That was straight. That was De Palma style. Oh my gosh, slow mo, kept cutting back. I mean, yeah. That was something you'd see in De Palma's The Fury or something. I mean, they're just milking it.
His hand hits the ground. He's like, oh, just missed it.
Yeah. Oh, so close. Yeah.
Man, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. I thought it was great. Yeah. Yeah, I thought the filmmaking was spot on. We haven't even talked about it. That opening scene is really cool with the power plant.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know anything about this electrical entity. This bolt of lightning hits the ground. Is this an alien invasion film? Mm-hmm. Or is this a ghost story? You don't actually ever know by when it's all said and done. And then you're kind of following it in the power plant, and then you're following it through the power lines, and just the credits are rolling. But man, that is a really effective setup for this monster.
Yeah, and I feel like a lesser film would have given you an explanation. Oh, he's, a murderer who, escaped into the electronic appliances. Yeah,
Right, yeah. It's an unofficial sequel to Shocker.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, I am surprised he did not go on to make more movies after this.
I know. The craftsmanship in this is great.
A solid first directorial debut.
Yeah, it's so good. And I mean, I think it's a $5 million movie, but it's just so polished and well executed on every front. It's really effective. And, and honestly, I mean, Joey Lawrence, he's obviously had a long-standing career as well. He's quite good in this, honestly. I mean, child performances, I'm always a little, forgiving on.
I mean, you can look at his brother.
Yeah, his brother. Compared to his brother, he's a freaking, fucking Robert De Niro. So, but man.
I mean, his brother kind of had those lines like, golly gee.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
The bowl cut and everything.
Was that the theme this year? Because the
bowl cuts
in the pit too. In fact,
my gosh,
the bowl cut in the pit's severe, man.
I had a note about his bowl cut 3 times. I realized it. I was like, oh, I need all these notes about his bowl cut. So in the pit, that's the most serious bowl cut. A lot of bowl cuts in the 80s, I guess. Any other thoughts about Pulse?
I would say if you can find it, go watch it. This spoiler alert, this was my favorite out of the 3. It's one of those if I could find and get a copy, I would add it to my collection and probably watch it occasionally just because it was a solid movie.
Yeah, it is. It is really solid. And like we said, it is actually streaming on YouTube. You can actually stream it on YouTube for free. I highly recommend everybody seek that out. There's also a fairly inexpensive DVD you can go out there and pick up as well. I believe there's a Blu-ray import, but there's no NTSC Blu-ray available at this time. So, but folks, seek this one out. It's extremely effective. It's so good. It's just classic 80s great sci-fi horror thriller that's just incredibly well done. All right, well, from a young Joey Lawrence taking out an electrical entity in the suburbs, we now join an equally young Lucas Haas as he tries to unravel the mystery behind The Lady in White from 1988.
It's 1962. It's Halloween.
I wish I was as weird as you. Thanks.
There's nothing wrong with the town of Willow Point Falls that a powerful imagination can't cure.
The London Bridge crumpled under the monster's huge lizard feet. That's impossible. Or is it?
But this time, it's not make-believe.
No, don't hurt him. It was too dark. I couldn't see his face.
This time it's serious, deadly serious.
I'm telling you, that doesn't matter. This case has been making monkeys out of all of us for the past 10 years.
And strange. Very strange. For you have seen a girl.
There was a little girl. I saw her. She was killed in the cloakroom.
A girl who wants you to find her killer.
Will you help me?
You have just one hope to solve the mystery.
Sometimes when someone dies violent, they can't rest in peace.
To stop the evil.
Where are you going? I gotta follow her.
To save your life.
Come here, child.
Open the door. Say your prayers. Lady in White.
All right, Waylon, you've got double duty this month. Can you please synopsize Lady in White for our audience out there?
All right. So The Lady in White takes place on Halloween in the early 60s here, mid-60s perhaps. And poor Franklin is tricked by some of the local school bullies and ends up locked in the closet at his school. While he's trapped in there, he ends up seeing the ghost of a little girl who it turns out was murdered in that closet, which opens this kid up to a whole mystery where as he starts trying to figure out who killed this girl, he begins discovering other things in the town. As the kid starts to explore the mystery of who murdered the little girl, he starts uncovering more of the underbelly of what's happening in his town, and eventually this brings him face to face with the legendary Lady in White, a rumored ghost who wanders the moors looking for her lost daughter. It is an interesting film, The Lady in White. Had anyone else seen this one before?
Well, I had.
Well, you had. Of course you had. I actually had seen it once before and only recalled it in like little bits and pieces. It's really interesting. It's written, directed, produced, and scored by the same guy, Frank. Is that LaLoggia?
Yeah.
LaLoggia?
Yeah, I think it's LaLoggia. Yeah. Very effective score, too. I mean, hats off to...
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's very well done.
And you can tell it's got like it's a clunky film. The plot is hard to synopsize because there's a lot that goes on in this movie beyond just that. Like when I talk about how the kid starts uncovering stuff, they talk about racial injustice, they talk about child abuse. There's all kinds of things that go on in this film, so it's a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. But at the same time, you can tell watching it that it is a passion project, and it's got this earnestness to it that sort of pulls it along through all of the sort of slightly clunky twists and turns. And it's also a beautiful film to look at. It is really like if Steven Spielberg made like a really fucked up ghost story movie, it would be kind of close to this.
Yeah. Unless you count Poltergeist, but you know.
Unless you count Poltergeist.
Which I'm in team. Yes, he directed that movie. But.
Yeah. I feel like you can tell what scenes he did and didn't direct in Poltergeist. Like the parents smoking pot in the bed. I'm like, that's Tobe Hooper.
Yeah. Brad, was this one you had seen before? And what did you think of Lady in White?
This has always been one I thought I've seen because that cover with him with the light behind him with the mask kind of on his head, like I'd always seen the cover in the video store, and I thought I'd seen it, but watching it, I hadn't seen it. This was the first time I've seen this. And especially out of the three, this is the most like movie of all of them. It's just like a somewhat heavier story. And, there's coming of age, there's a ghost story, there's, bullying, there's racial injustice. There's so much going on in it. It's one of those like, man, they put a lot in here and did a very good job of crafting a film with all of that. Like it was very like a Stand By Me kind of like feel to it in places and other things. So it was, although not my favorite of all of them this week, it was still a very well done movie. Although I will say some of those effects don't hold up.
Some of the
that's that green screen just didn't work.
Some of the compositing is like pretty shoddy in this for sure.
But it was like shoddy in a way that was sort of cozy for me. I mean, I remember these kind of shoddy green screen effects. Yeah,
you kind of forgive it a bit for its time. You're like, compositing just wasn't what it was, back then as it is now. And they had to do a lot of compositing in this film.
They did a lot.
Yeah, which I don't know if they had to. I probably would have made another choice to not do as much as he did.
I know a lot of it, especially in the cliff's edge. I mean, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, that whole final kind of battle was like heavily comped.
They're like, I can't find the right cliff. That's okay. We can.
We'll add it in post.
Put them together.
Well, they were keeping him safe too.
Although the one matte painting background, I loved it. I think it was towards the beginning when you're talking about the town, and then you see like a bigger, stuff in the background.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh man, the art of matte.
Oh, mattes are so great. Yeah, anything you can do in camera and stuff, it's so effective. It looks so seamless, and it's almost like a lost art now because everybody just uses After Effects or something to composite things. Speaking of the effects, in some of those dream sequences, did anybody have a little bit of it's almost like a Ken Russell kind of style to some of them? I don't know, Waylon, if you thought that.
Well, no, it's interesting you bring up Ken Russell, actually, because I first heard about this film through a book I had as a kid. It was like 50 modern horror classics. And this guy had odd taste because Lady in White is in there, and so is Lair of the White Worm. Yes. Both of which, when I saw later, I went, huh.
Both have comedy elements in them, too. So those are actually a couple of good movies to sort of pair together. Although personally, I would actually pair Lady in White with like movies we talked about last year, the Dark Side of Disney films, Watcher in the Woods, and Something Wicked This Way Comes, because it is almost like a family film in a lot of ways. It's like a very dark, heavy family film, but there's also like all these whimsical touches and stuff to it. I mean, that whole opening sequence in the film is just like really comedic. Like when we're first introduced to them as kids and, he's going through the town on his bike and causing car wrecks and, going into the concrete with his pumpkin. It is very like almost Spielbergian, kind of schmaltzy.
It got me in the mood of like, oh, I know it's only March, but I want it to be Halloween now. Because
this is a great Halloween movie. And this is one, if you have kids, this is maybe a good one to show them, at a younger age, because it is scary, but it's not gory, it's not particularly violent. It does deal with a pretty heavy thing, which is child murder, though. So fair warning on that. But God knows I saw a lot darker shit when I was a kid.
Yeah. And we're just fine.
I mean, that was like TV movies of the week. I mean, my God, there was a show called Chiefs. Which was like a 3-part miniseries about child murder. Waylon, what else did you think of Lady in White?
Boy, where do you start? As a whole, it's kind of a mixed bag, but it has these individual sequences that do really just implant themselves in your brain and stay there. Like you guys were talking about the opening scenes are some of the best Halloween movie shots ever. I mean, they have lots of like soft diffused light, so everything's got this kind of beautiful glow about it. They use a lot of accurate era like decorations and masks and stuff like that. If anyone ever collected the old Aurora movie monster model kits, those pop up in the film, which is exciting.
Guilty,
yeah.
Yeah, oh my God. I related to this so much. My room was full of like those model kits, the Mummy and Frankenstein and Dracula. Yeah, I had loads of them.
Yeah, those are awesome. I love that Phantom of the Opera model kit had a mask you could put on or off.
Yeah. And I had ones that had, some of them had the glow-in-the-dark pieces on, and then some of them didn't, And
that was awesome. And and it's got an amazing cast, actually. So I know we talked, so Franklin is played by a very young Lucas Haas, who does have my favorite line in Mars Attacks, which is, "Look, they made the international sign of the donut."
Lucas Haas is a treasure, and a really good child actor. I mean, he's really good in this.
Oh, he's great.
He's great in Witness and Testament and a lot of those early films. He was a big child actor in the 80s.
Well, they also have Jared Michael Rushton, who was as the bully, who was also in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Pet Sematary 2. Which
oh, wow.
I hope we get to at some point.
And Big, too, as well.
Big.
Wow.
Oh, my God. Yeah, you're right. Holy shit. Because I mixed him up initially with the bully from Monster Squad, who Rudy makes eat the Snickers bar at some point.
Yeah, they look similar.
Yeah. Oh, and the dad too, Alex Rocco, who was just like, if you'll see him when you watch this movie, because I hope you all do check it out, and immediately you'll go, that guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very recognizable.
Oh, yeah. That's exactly what I did while I was watching. I was like, oh, this guy's in it.
That guy, yeah. Awesome.
I think his best known role is that he played Mo Green in The Godfather, and he's the guy that gets shot in the eye during that classic montage during the baptism.
Yes.
But yeah, he's been in a million things.
And Katherine Hellman, of course, who...
Back to back, we're already watching another Katherine Hellman film.
We should have called her the Great Katherine Hellman, because she is, every time she shows up. In fact, Amy pointed out that she was criminally underused, because, for a film called The Lady in White doesn't really show up that often.
Yeah.
But when she does, it's golden. And in fact, it's not a scary movie as much as I think it would like to have those scary moments. But her scene, when she first shows up, is genuinely hair-raising. She's freaky deaky. There's that close-up where she's coming at the camera and her hands are... They have like a fisheye lens. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like attached to her. Yeah, the camera work in this is quite something. I mean, we've talked about, obviously, the compositing isn't so great in parts, but the actual just camera work, the dolly moves, and the lens choices, and the compositions are, I think, like top notch. It's a really well constructed film from beginning to end.
I don't know what their budget was on this. They did it so well that I think they made it feel bigger than probably what they had.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. As Waylon mentioned, this is a total passion project. He was also an actor, the director for this. He did one other film, which I also would highly recommend. Well, he did two other films, but I've only seen the other one he did before this. He did a movie called Fear No Evil. So if you can find this movie, I think it might be on Tubi, but check it out. It is kind of a anti-Christ horror movie from the 80s that is pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Definitely worth checking out. And you get another sense of his kind of, unique sense of filmmaking. I love so much about this. Sure, it's a bit of a flawed film, but somehow it is able to balance all these different things like you all were talking about, like between the civil rights in the background with the janitor accusation and stuff. And oh my God, those bully kids, I couldn't believe what was coming out of their mouths. Like, there's some racist little shits.
Yeah.
Like, holy mackerel, man. This small town, outside of New York has got the racist. And the dream sequences are so good and so well handled, sans the effects and stuff, but still the ideas in them are really, really cool.
I mean, at the time, the effects, you look at it and go, oh yeah, these worked for the time. So
I don't think it stuck out as much to me as a kid. Now on rewatch, I'm like, oh, okay, it's definitely a lot of these effects are very different.
Like my kids, I show them older films and they're like, oh, when was this made? This looks terrible. Yeah. I'm like, guys, this is the best we could do.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
We didn't have CGI everything.
And you're like, and someday your kids will look at the movies that you like now and be like, ugh, this looks terrible. Yeah.
Some of them don't though. I mean, I showed Ghostbusters to my son and he freaking loved it,
Really?
And honestly, those effects, like a lot of them do hold up. And the optical stuff is still as good as some of the CGI today.
Well, it's because they crank them out in rabbit's pace these days, so they don't give them full time to really put things together.
Yeah.
So
there's too much reliance on the effects. Back then, they had to really think about it. They had to think about how to do it. They had to think about how can we do this, like with cameras and with optical passes and compositing in that way and stuff. And they did less of it, and it was like less was more. And because they focused so much on each shot, and there was only like 5 minutes of effects in a 2-hour movie or something. And as opposed to now, it's like
Every
you know,
scene.
the whole half the movie is green screen, and we're all gonna build the
We have
set.
2,000
I
effects.
fucking hate that. I get so bored too. Like we watched WandaVision, and I was totally on board right up until the end, and then I just wanted to fall asleep with all the lasers. And,
Yeah, I felt the same way. I like that show until the end. And then I got bored too. And as you'd mentioned, Stand By Me, I thought that too because of the kind of framing device around this with the VO. Because he's an author, he writes like horror novels. He's coming back. He sees the two gravestones of the mother and the daughter that's been lost, and you don't know what that mystery is. And this is like a classic ghost story, because a classic ghost story is always like, we've encountered a ghost, and now we have to find out why this person is not at rest. And then it's unraveling that mystery and then bringing that ghost back to peace. And that is exactly what happens in this film. It is that classic formula of a ghost story. That's in everything from The Changeling to Ringu. So,
yeah.
Although she don't really rest at Ringo. So, she's just evil. Also, there's so many good little scenes in this movie. I love when the kids go into the creepy old house with the baby gator. And they're trying to catch the little gator around the house. That is so good. That is such a fun scene. And of course, then we get that great, Catherine Hellman, introduction.
You might be able to answer this. Amy and I couldn't figure it out because the house that they go into with the gator is different than the house that Catherine Hellman lives in by the cliff.
Yeah, they talk about that. So
Okay.
Because of the incident that happened with the mother and daughter, the old woman, she tried to kill herself. And then once she was released, she went into a different house. So when they walk by that big house and she kind of moves the curtain over and stuff and peers out, she actually lives somewhere else. She doesn't live in that old house. No one lives in that old house anymore. But because she sees the kids, she overhears them that they're going to that old house. She kind of follows them, and that's how she ends up there. That's what I
thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Also, I gotta say that at the end, so Catherine Hellman is revealed, like Brad was saying, she's not actually a ghost at all. She was a piano teacher. She witnessed the murder of the dead girl and then the subsequent suicide of the mother and went insane. But she saves Lucas Haas from the real killer at some point, and then she's got him in this little house shack by the sea, lit with like 1,000 candles. And I went, man, that's a fire hazard. 5 minutes later, and the entire thing is in flames. Yeah.
Yeah, but it looks so good. It sets up for that big fiery, showdown between the actual killer and the kid. And I'm really I think we're all holding our, the reveal of who that killer is close to the chest maybe on this one, just because for folks out there who haven't seen this, I would really encourage them to go see it. It's great.
Yeah.
It is a really, really effective ghost story. It's interesting too. Lady in White, I looked this up. This is like a super common myth in like almost all cultures.
Yeah, because they have La Lorna in Mexico.
It's Llorona, La Llorona, I think.
La Llorona,
it's like
right.
It's like a Y.
My Spanish is the worst.
I had to look it up too. I was like, how do you pronounce La Llorona? Yeah,
I can order a taco. It's about as good as it gets for me. Let's talk with the pollo,
I'll have
por
that with the
favor.
side of La Llorona.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. Like Malaysia, I mean, just everywhere, all around the world, and even like each state in the United States has their own like white lady kind of like myth folklore around it. Like it has its own like sort of ghost story. So this has just been like passed on forever, this sort of story. It's interesting. He took this classic kind of myth and he sort of built his own kind of like story around it. And I don't know. I thought it was really effective. I think it's an extremely effective ghost story from beginning to end.
Well, I think every little town kind of has there too, because the little town I grew up in Colorado, we had that house that there was someone that lives there. You don't go in that house, and big story behind it. Like I just think the kids these days don't have that.
I know. They're really missing out. They're watching creepypasta instead.
I know.
So, yeah, I had one. In my neighborhood, there was a hill. There wasn't a house, but there was a well in the hill, and we called it Haunted Hill. And we all had a story about the kid that like fell down the well and died, and now he haunts the hill and stuff. And you can see him on like Halloween night and whatever other bullshit we fed to people. So I may have been part of why a lot of these myths sort of perpetrated.
We didn't have the internet, so we made up our own stories.
Yeah, living in our imagination and hanging out on construction sites, just as God intended.
That's right.
What other thoughts do we have about Lady in White?
I did like the one tie-in, when he first pulls to the cemetery and they really focus in on the gates. And then when we go to the past, we see him like putting the gate together.
Oh, yeah,
and
that's
like,
cute.
oh,
At his
it's
dad's
still-
shop. Yeah, that's an interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing too. I was like, oh, that kind of helps with the sort of intro part. It is dealing with death, and it's a little bit metaphorical because like he's about to open a gate to another world too. He's about to open a gate to the beyond. So they're working on that gate to the cemetery. I thought that was like an interesting kind of like symbolic kind of piece in the story. Him trapped in the closet that's a pretty creepy scene. I love that he puts the vampire mask down so that the killer doesn't actually recognize him. And stuff. And then that's a big part of it as well.
The whole lighting and everything in that scene with the window and he's in front of it. It just
the moonlight hitting him. Yeah,
it looks amazing.
Yeah.
It's iconic. That's why it's the poster. I mean, it's an iconic scene for sure.
I was a little bit like, it was the because we talk about how it's framed around the author, visiting his hometown, or the main character now as an adult. But it doesn't quite tie back in at the end. Like Stand By Me has that great payoff where you see Richard Dreyfuss as the dad,
Him back at the typewriter.
yeah, and all that. And this kind of it starts off as the framing. It doesn't really need it. The narration sort of comes in and out because it's narrated by the adult Franklin, but it kind of drops off, and by the end of the movie, it's just completely forgotten about.
Yeah,
it's like a little bit of a critique,
But I think it helped his character though, because like when he's reading the story to all the kids, which is a really great scene.
Yeah,
he's like a writer from the get-go and stuff. Like this was his passion, and this is what he followed through. And
I love how the teacher got into the story too, and they're just like,
really
he has a weird relationship with that teacher. I must say, he's like helping her carry the books to like her car and all this stuff, and he has this like conversation and like it seems like the teacher likes his dad and like wants to date him, but like that's also like this thing that's just kind of dropped. Like they don't really get into that much.
This is a bookend theme. We had the teacher and the boy in the beginning, and now we have them in the end. Another underlying theme. Yes. All while he has cement on him, he doesn't get to clean up or anything. You got to live with it all day, buddy.
Yeah,
totally.
Childhood in the 60s. I guess covered in cement.
Full of racism and awesome Halloween decorations.
Right? Don't you wish you could have the Halloween decorations without the racism? Wouldn't that just have been a little bit nicer?
Yeah, that would be nice. That'd be nice. Still working on that.
Although
in this country.
I was surprised, the janitor, when they released him and they put him in the car, I wasn't expecting her to come up to the car.
Oh, that was a very effective scene. But that's like a scene you'd see in like a different movie too. It's it's like a scene you'd see out of like a heavy like John Grisham novel movie or something like that.
And I put in my notes at that time, I was like, this movie's getting heavy.
It really does. It's got some heavy stuff. I mean, outside of just the child murder aspect.
Child murder's not that heavy.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it does explore like what that has done to this community. And like that's what that scene really, this like sweet woman who's like, just lost her child and like wants so bad to get justice, and then she pulls the trigger on him, and you're just like, wow. It is quite a shocking scene, and it's very sad.
Well, and then the way it's edited when it cuts to his wife and just what happens to her, and I'm just like, I was like, I wasn't ready for this scene.
Heavy stuff. Yeah, there's heavy stuff in this for sure. Yeah, it's a heavy drama. And I've always said this. I usually am really kind of drawn to the horror films that are also really great dramas, to be honest with you. I mean, to me, The Exorcist is a great drama as well.
Sure.
This is not necessarily a fun movie to watch with your friends or something like that, but it is a very effective ghost story. With a lot of heavy, dramatic moments and really great performances all throughout. Mm-hmm. Any other parting thoughts?
I was just reading a book called Candy, A Century of Pleasure and Panic, that talks about the history of candy corn as a Halloween confection. And I was happy to report that the scene of them pouring candy corn into the bowl was historically accurate. It was around the mid-'60s that started taking off. So just points for detail accuracy.
Shot through the roof. So,
woo!
Oh, candy corn. Oh, you have a poster of candy corn. Is that a film someone could watch on Tubi?
It is. It's a indie horror movie. It was filmed just outside of Cincinnati. It played at Horror Hound, and I became a big fan of it. So
I'll check it out. Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. You've got the 411 on the obscure indie horror films, especially of today.
I try.
Awesome. So Lady in White, it's streaming on MGM Plus, but there's also a Blu-ray out there available as well. Definitely worth picking this.
I think it's also on Tubi.
Oh,
as
is it
well.
also on Tubi? Excellent.
That's where I watched it. Yeah.
Nice. Well, did we have a favorite film this month, Brad? What was your favorite film? I think you already said.
Pulse was my favorite. It was the one that just surprised me because I knew nothing about it beforehand, and then watching it, I'm like, oh. Where was this movie all my life? Like, I totally would have watched this movie a lot as a kid if I would have known about it.
It's great. It's a real diamond in the rough for sure. Waylon, what about you? What did you have? Did you have a favorite as well?
I'm going with Pulse as well. You know, it's just not just on the surprise factor, but it's a scary horror movie, which I don't think we touched on this. It's a scary horror movie where nobody dies outside of the beginning. There's not a single death in that movie, and it's still fucking tense and effective. So, Pulse.
Yeah.
That's off.
It's all suspense. Yeah, it's super effective. I actually had a hard time picking my favorite this time because on one hand you have it's like no, I don't think so. No, it's actually between I'd say I don't know actually. This one's tough because on one hand The Pit is like crazy cult film. You'll never forget it because it's so deranged and messed up and you can't take your eyes off it. But it's extremely flawed. Pulse is actually, I would say, the least flawed film of the three films we watched. I have like the fewest complaints about that movie. It is just so well done and well executed and effective. But I'm actually going to go with Lady in White because there's an audacity to Lady in White. Even though it is like a traditional classic ghost story, the filmmaking and what all they were able to pack in that story, I don't know. I was like really kind of blown away by it. So I'm going to go with Lady in White for my pick, actually.
Lady in White probably would have been a close second just because it was a well-crafted, just well-done movie that hits heavier than you think it's going to.
For sure. Yeah. Three very interesting films for sure. Awesome. Well, it's been great chatting about obscure horror films with you. Thanks again for joining us. Is there anything that you'd like to promote coming up, Brad?
Well, I mean, you can just find me and just search for Old Man Brad out there. I have a couple interviews that I'm excited about coming out. I just talked to Sean Heights about Cannibal Comedian, the movie that just came out, For Sale by Exorcists.
Oh, yeah. I know that film.
Melissa LaMartina,
Cool.
I just talked to her. And coming up after that, I'm going to be talking more Mickey Mouse Steamboat Willie with the director behind Screamboat. So you don't want to miss that
There
one.
are so many of these Disney like public domain movies right now. It's like wild. There's like a new one every week.
Oh yeah, and I'm eating them up. I'm
sure. I'm sure in a couple of years you're gonna write a book about like just this little period in time of like there's like a Pinocchio one coming out and like
Yep. There is. Winnie the Pooh, Peter Pan, Popeyes have come out recently. Now we got all these Steamboat Willies. I think this is the 4th Steamboat Willie movie to come out.
Oh my god.
My gosh.
And I will tell you, Screamboat knew its assignment and it
delivered.
It laid into it well
Nice.
with it.
Nice. Awesome. Well, it's been amazing chatting with you about these films. Everybody out there, please go check out Old Man Brad. You can find his podcast all over the place, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere. But definitely check it out. He's got a lot of great reviews for a lot of hidden gems out there. A lot of films you've never heard.
If you need some Tubi recommendations, every week I do a Tubi Tuesday. So if you follow me on Blue Sky, I put out a theme and we watch movies to the theme of the day.
Nice.
That's cool.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, we need folks like you, Brad, to help us sift through all the movies on Tubi.
Yes.
So there's just a glut of stuff.
I watch a lot.
Glut of stuff out there. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I had a blast.
Awesome. Well, coming up next month, we're hitting the high seas to walk the plank and search for buried treasure as we dive into 3 pirate comedies from the 1980s. We will discuss the pirate movie from 1983, Yellowbeard, also from 1983, and Roman Polanski's Pirates from 1986. Joining us once again to unpack these treasures will be friend of the pod and senior film critic for the Nashville scene, Jason Shawn. Until next time, be kind as we rewind.